And here we are with episode 42.
Yeah, how are you doing, Robert?
I'm well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing quite all right.
Excellent,
Mm.
great. I'm sure I should do some sort of joke about the number, but I'm kind of all out, really.
Right, yeah.
Yes. But I have read most of, I think I've read them all, but I haven't read them, some of them since I was a kid, actually. So I probably should read the Hitchhiker's
Yeah.
Guide to the Galaxy again. Have you ever read
I've only
Hitchhikers?
read I've only read Life, the Universe, and Everything. And I have to admit, at the time, I hated it. I don't know, I guess it's the sardonic approach to everything. I mean, I know who Douglas Adams is. I know
Yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
satirical approach to things like that. Maybe I was not in the right mindset, and maybe I should have started from the beginning. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
That's like the fourth one, I think, or something.
probably, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the problem with that might be that you're jumping right into the story part way through.
Yeah,
So
right.
some things might be confusing.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Well, I did see that movie though. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie. Yeah,
Yes. So
yeah.
I actually watched it again recently. It's
Hmm.
it's all right. I mean,
Hmm.
I think anyone who likes hitchhikers, I guess, would have to have seen it. The there was a 1980s miniseries that was actually my first exposure to the
Oh,
series, and I rewatched that again a little while ago, and that I think that's fabulous. I mean, the graphics obviously were very 1980s, but it actually works, I think.
okay.
Yes. And while we're on the topic of Douglas Adams, actually, so there's an interesting point that Douglas Adams makes a joke fairly early on that Homo sapiens still think wristwatches are an amazing idea, right?
Hmm. Right.
And some people have said that joke is because obviously very few of us wear wristwatches now. Some people have said that joke is dated now, but I think it just proves that Adams was right.
Hmm.
We very quickly went beyond wristwatches. I'm sure he didn't expect that to happen when he was making the joke in the 1970s, but we did it. We don't wear wristwatches much anymore. So he was right.
Well, I'm still keeping it real here. So,
Oh, okay, fair enough,
yeah,
fair enough.
yeah, yep,
Yes.
yep.
No,
Yep.
I've long since ceased to wear wristwatches. Anyway,
Sure, yeah.
yes.
Well, I mean, it's a Garmin wristwatch, and it keeps track of like stuff like how many steps I take. If you consider any of that pretty reliable, and it's still good, and I'm all about keeping up to date on the few uh, notifications I have and so forth.
No,
Yeah.
fair enough.
So yeah. Yeah.
I end up looking at my phone.
Mm.
But anyway, so we've got just a few things to talk about tonight, actually.
Yep.
Uh, First one is Kamala Harris.
Okay.
I
What
don't
don't
know.
we have about her to talk
Right.
about?
I don't know. I've got a few
Mhm.
thoughts. Did you want to jump in first, or shall I just jump
Oh
in?
no, I mean, like I said, it's where do you want to start with this creature is the thing. So I am kind of going through a bit of paralysis when it comes to that subject. Like almost more than
Inform
feminism itself. Where do you want to start with this creature?
Information overload, almost. I guess.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Uh,
yeah.
mhm.
I mean, I'm coming to you from Australia, so I'm only seeing what's online. I imagine you're seeing a lot on TV and whatnot, and
Well, I
mass
don't
media.
watch TV, but I do
Okay.
pay attention to the internet. So yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, good point. Neither do I anymore, actually. So,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't even listen to the radio that much. Although,
Right.
yeah, my the Bluetooth in my phone, Bluetooth in my car stopped working briefly, and I was
Mhm.
forced to listen to the radio at that stage.
Oh, okay.
But it's interesting. So, okay, I'll give you my perspective as someone who's coming from the outside looking in. It looked like before Biden resigned, excuse me, Trump pretty much had the election sewn up.
Mhm.
I would say that Trump is still probably going to win. That's my call. But I think that Kamala has sort of got the new kid on the block thing going, and because she didn't, it's true with politicians in general. When somebody turns up and they're new, they usually get a bit of a honeymoon period.
Mhm.
So obviously she's VP, but because she's the new candidate, I think she has enjoyed that early benefit of that honeymoon period. And it seems like her numbers improved relative to Trump. Also, the Democrat numbers sort of caught up. As I said, I still think Trump's going to win, but I do think that it isn't as the sure thing perhaps it was a few months ago. So that's my take at the moment.
Well, my take is a bit different. I am incredibly wary of the Democrats here at this moment. I'm pretty sure. See, I do think that Trump's popularity is in fact at an all-time high, and I think some of Harris's popularity might be exaggerated for media purposes.
Hmm.
However, I do think that we have to expect some shenanigans. I think there. I uh, I'm pessimistic enough that whereas Trump should win, he'll probably have it snatched again.
Right. Okay.
Under them. Yeah. So that's my pessimistic take
Yeah.
on this one. I don't want to be a pessimist, but it's something I just
Yeah.
can't help but think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, again, for looking from the outside in. The US electoral system, in some ways, is quite complicated from the point of view of people who might live in Canada or Australia or even the UK, where the system is fairly relatively straightforward. I've voted in Canadian and Australian elections, and the system is relatively straightforward. They're paper ballots. You follow the instructions that are printed on the sheet, and you put it in a box. But I know the American system has, I know it varies by state for one thing, and also the fact that in some states they have voting machines, which in the past have apparently been quite a problem, and there have been cases of them marking the wrong ballot and all sorts of things. So,
Mm.
I'm a bit concerned about from that respect in that the complexity of the US system. Sometimes people have, I think, misused the machines or not understood how they work properly, and that's caused problems as well. So. It's a bit unfortunate, but there do seem to be problems there. Again, I
Right.
don't know what your thoughts are.
Right. I mean, that's as best as I could ever sum it up myself. But one thing that I want to really stress is that Tim Walz is absolute dreck. Like I was in Minnesota, as
Mm.
and his policies was total. They were total trash. Like everything bad that happened in Minnesota, pinning on Tim Walz is like my way of looking at the whole thing. So,
Now, he was the governor. Oh, then. Uh,
mhm.
right.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I
yeah,
haven't really read much about him.
yeah.
So,
To be
okay.
perfectly honest, uh, Tim Walz, the pick as Tim Walz as vice president should have hurt Harris a lot.
Okay.
So maybe it is hurting her a lot. But I'm just saying, sh they're not above shenanigans. So,
Yeah.
uh, right, yeah,
Why do you think it would have hurt the campaign because of his background?
because of his background. Yeah, sure. I mean,
Okay.
not only that he was, uh, people are kind of like onto him. Basically, it's just
Right.
yeah, yeah. Basically, every kind of bad policy is his doing over there, and he's definitely a woke guy to be sure, like to
Right.
the max.
Is that right? Because it's
Mm,
often the case, I think, that they pick a VP somewhat different from the presidential candidate, pick a VP somewhat different from themselves in order to appeal to a different demographic or a different
interesting.
group. But it
Hmm.
sounds like in this case, if she's gone for a woke VP candidate as well,
Right.
and she tends to lean that way herself, but maybe I
Hmm.
guess in the Democratic Party, maybe there's not a lot of options in that
Yeah,
regard.
I'm surprised that Chicago mayor didn't get get the vice president
Okay,
slot. Yeah, yeah.
right. I
But
don't know. I don't know that person.
it's that I think it's that queer black woman. I think it is. You probably know it if you
Oh,
saw
okay.
her. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That really horrific looking guy one. Yeah. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm
that's
gonna have
all.
to look it up.
Yeah, it's all I really. Lightfoot, I think that's her name.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Right. Yeah,
think
I'm
I'm
gonna
pretty
look it
sure.
up.
Yeah, I'm probably I'm going straight off the top of my head on this thing. I don't like. I have such apathy about politics more than I should. So,
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
yeah.
Well, as I've mentioned previously in Australia, voting is compulsory. So
Hmm.
it does, yeah.
Yeah,
So they can at least compel you to turn up.
yeah, exactly.
Voting in Canada is not compulsory, but I do vote in Canadian elections, even though I haven't lived in the country for a number of years.
I see.
Yes. I don't know. Do we have anything else on Kamala Harris?
Um, I don't think so, but there's going to be more to come. She is, even without all the policy problems, she's obnoxious. Why do we want
Yeah,
this creature as our president?
yeah.
I will never know. So,
The one that I guess I had one final point on it. The when she was, I think, Attorney General in California, as is widely known now, there was an attempt or consideration by her department to keep inmates in prison longer so that they could be used for cheap labor with firefighting. And she's denied any knowledge of that. I find that really concerning because if that was her department, and that would be a major initiative, very high. The idea of keeping inmates in longer would be very high profile. So if she didn't know that was going on in her department, actually that sounds incompetent to me. So either she was incompetent and she didn't know it was going on, or she did know it was going on and she's lied. So either way, it's very bad.
right, yeah. Yeah, and there's the thing that she seems to deflect every kind of important question directly to her with this cackle, this kind of obnoxious laugh.
Okay.
Yeah, in a way, it kind of reminds me of back in the Jimmy Carter days. Not that I was there. I'm
Yeah.
too young for that. But supposedly, a lot of his conditioned automatic response was by smiling. Like it could be like some kind of catastrophic, serious question, and he would just kind of
Yeah.
smile like an automatic response. So
Yeah.
it's kind
Yeah.
of reminiscent of that, only worse. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that now you mentioned it, a lot of pictures of him do mention him smiling.
mhm.
I think I was actually around for Jimmy Carter, but the first president that I paid attention to was Ronald Reagan.
I see. Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
So, uh, yep, that's all I have on Kamala Harris.
Yep.
I guess as the election gets closer, this topic will come up again.
Yep. I think it will.
Uh, yes, Khalif is the next one.
Hmm.
Well, I wanted to mention.
Yes.
So the first thing I saw was, and I know this is a topic you've had a great interest in, Vernon. The first thing I noticed was a series of headlines saying Khalif suing J.K. Rowling and Elon
Now,
Musk.
now I've actually this is the first I've heard of it, but based on what we talked about before, why wouldn't she sue? Yeah.
Right. So this is the interesting thing, though. When I investigated further, it actually looks like, unless there's two legal actions going on, but I haven't found that to be
Mm,
the case, it actually looks like it's a criminal action under French law that's being initiated.
mm,
Now now apparently J.K. Rowling's gone quite quiet on the topic on her Twitter account or X account
right.
because I wouldn't be at all surprised if the UK and France have some sort of extradition treaty that would be relevant. So that could be really interesting to see what happens in that regard. But I was just going to say a lot of the media have jumped on this word of suit, which would imply civil law, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, French law is different, but nevertheless, it does appear to be a criminal matter, a criminal investigation under French law.
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
So, which is
Yeah.
potentially a lot more serious.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even Elon Musk was the ones who kind of jumped on that whole bandwagon of calling her a
Mm.
man, even though she was in fact not. So.
Right, and exactly. Unless you've got some pretty solid evidence,
Hmm.
like some data that's showing that the Y chromosome has been found or something,
Hmm.
even if she was say androgen insensitive or something, yes, you wouldn't be using terminology like that. Shouldn't be using it
Yeah.
unless you've got some proof. That's right.
Yeah. Sure. Well, give it a few more years, and I think like Elon Musk will invent the self-driving bandwagon.
I like it,
Yeah.
and he would definitely be the first to use it. Yep.
To be sure. Yeah.
Yes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the criminal complaint. I'll keep looking into it to see whether there is a civil matter too,
Yeah.
but I haven't found one. It's just been
Hmm.
this French criminal complaint.
Yep. Yeah, sure. And
Uh,
this is one place where Elon Musk fucked up. So yeah, yeah. Just because you're anti-woke doesn't mean just do
no, absolutely not.
the same bandwagon shit that the woke do.
Exactly.
So
And we
so
see this
it,
with
it doesn't
we see
excuse you
this.
from thinking. It does not excuse
That's
you
right.
from thinking.
That's right. And we see this with trade cons a lot, actually. We see it from
Hmm.
both sides of politics. Yeah, a lot
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
same problems. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
The final one I have for
Hmm.
tonight is
We got a short episode, don't we?
it might be a short
Yeah.
episode.
Hmm.
Rachael Gunn. Now, obviously, she's better known as Raygun.
Okay.
This is the break dancer who did a wonderful job representing my country. Uh, yes, so it's actually really interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
so obviously there are people here. It sounds like overseas the media is sort of portraying that she's getting more support in Australia than she really is. I think. Pretty much on the ground, what I'm hearing in Australia is that people are pretty unimpressed by what happened.
Mhm.
Uh, Interestingly enough, in the last couple of days, there's a female Australian breakdancer by the name of Leah Clark. She's actually come out now and is being openly critical of what happened because she's pointing out that this is now having an impact on breakdancing in Australia, and there's a concern over whether grants, maybe grants won't be allocated and so forth because
She's
it's
criticizing Raygun here.
Raygun,
Yeah, yeah,
sorry,
yeah, yeah.
criticizing
Mhm.
Raygun for bringing the sport in Australia into disrepute, essentially, and
Uh-huh.
that may have
Right.
it may cause problems with government and private sector grants and so forth. So,
Right.
yes, and making the sport a bit of a laughing stock, and a lot of Australians. I mean, we're laughing at the memes just as much as anyone else, but
Yep.
yes, it was pretty embarrassing from a national point of view, and I say that as
Right.
someone who's not in love with the Olympics, but they are supposed to
Yep.
be top of the line athletes, top level athletes,
Mhm.
and I really think it's there are very clear that there are better people in Australia who could have gone and done a better showing, made a better
Well,
showing.
aside from this, when did breakdancing become a thing in the Olympics anyway?
This is the only time. So it was not, it's never been in before. And
Mhm.
LA, which is 28, has said they are definitely not doing it. And I think we can take it as read that Brisbane, near me in 32, will not be doing it either. So I'd say this may be
Mhm.
the only time. So some people claim that Raygun had killed at the Olympics. LA had already said that they weren't doing it. However, I do think she may have, sealed it permanently. So
Mhm.
that's my
So
view.
you'd think, something this large scale, as something called the Olympics, um, any given thing that it features should be to some degree larger than life. So you can't just so even if the idea of breakdancing as an Olympic sport is valid, it should be larger scale. You can't just be breakdancing. Why not breakdancing in like some dangerous platforms or some kind of other kind of more challenging circumstances and such, more elaborate, like never before seen kind of thing. Why
Mm.
can't it be much more larger than life, much more grand? Much more daring. You can't just show up and do it, and like so because like even Monty Python had the right idea with the Olympic hide and seek in the episode they
Oh,
had the Olympic
I
hide and
love that.
seek.
I watched that recently too, actually.
Hmm.
It is for anyone who
Right.
hasn't seen it, go see it. It's fabulous. About 10 or
Yeah,
15
right, right.
minutes.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like so how much am I going to spoil by talking about this? I mean, I'm sure it's going to still be funny if you saw it, but
And it's been
you
around for
know,
40 years. It's okay.
right, right. Was it the uh, John Graham Chapman? I don't remember if he was American or English in that role, but Terry is Terry Jones is Paraguay, and so each of them took 11 years to find
That's
the other
right. So
guy.
basically, it's hide and seek across the entire world, and they
Right,
start in London. That's right, and then and one of the guys, first thing he does is jumps on a plane, international flight.
right,
Yeah,
absolutely, and he hides in some castle in Sardinia, and
exactly. That's right.
right,
That's right.
mhm, right, yeah, and uh, but that's what I mean. It's like it should be large scale.
Yes, yes.
I know that the Olympic hide and seek is a bit of a joke, but um,
So somebody, I won't name any names, but somebody I know actually, one of our internal men's rights groups actually has made an interesting suggestion. He said, why not do parkour? And I think actually that would be really interesting because if you've never watched any parkour videos, Paris has got really quite a parkour scene because they've got all those old buildings and the crammed together and so forth. There's all sorts of interesting parkour stuff they can do.
yeah,
Would have been really interesting actually for them to have considered something like that.
hmm
But anyway, too late now.
absolutely, right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, despite all its problems, if you're going by the original intent of something like the Olympics, you gotta break new ground and like do colossal things, you know. You can't just show up and be represented like I'm pretty sure these women are content at being, basically.
Yes, actually, so one thing about Raygun, I
Mhm.
guess probably most people know this now, but she did she says she's an academic. Now, a lot of people on hearing this think, oh, so she's a biologist or a chemist or something who also does breakdancing. No, she's an academic in breakdancing, and her PhD thesis is on breakdancing and gender. Dare I say, it sounds a bit woke to me, but haven't read the thesis or anything about it, but it sounds a bit woke to
Mhm.
me. So
Right.
anyway, yes, I think there's very much a leaning there. That's certainly my
Mhm.
take on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, who respects academics anymore? Because we know what this is the horse crap it's gonna be,
Mm.
you know. So yeah.
Exactly. So she actually is employed by the University of Macquarie, sorry, Macquarie University, I should say, in Australia, which is I have to say I thought it was a pretty good university, but my opinion of it's
Mhm.
gone down if this is
Uh-huh.
the type of stuff they've got going on. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one of the biggest university or top universities in Australia, but I did think it was fairly up there. But no, I'm quite unimpressed by this, and maybe it wasn't as good as I thought.
Yeah.
So I have one more item. Actually, I think I did say before this was my last item, but I actually did add an extra one at the last minute. But it's
Yeah.
more of a teaser. So before I go on to that, any thoughts or final thoughts on Raygun?
The same I already said, you know, just
Yeah,
do something more epic. Do
yep,
something, you know,
yep.
even if it is breakdancing, you know, even if it's Beyblades, do something epic. You know?
Actually, should yeah, sorry, should yeah, yeah, exactly. Should have been there. Some rollerblading or something. There we go. Anyway, I
Rollerblading,
love,
that's fine.
I
Yeah.
love rollerblading. So
Yeah, sure, sure. Beyblades are a bit different though from rollerblading. So
actually, on the topic of that, before I go on to this, well, sorry, yeah, Beyblades, yeah, yeah. On the topic of rollerblading in Paris, actually,
Mhm. Yeah.
they do a regular rollerblading through the city, apparently, where
Mhm.
they close off the streets and people rollerblade right through Paris, which I think is really cool. So
Mhm.
I have been to Paris, but that didn't happen while I was there. I think it's about once a month they do it.
Mhm.
So I'd love to see
Right.
that. I don't know if I participated in it, but I'm probably a bit slower than I was. But I would, but I'd
Yeah.
certainly go and watch it. Yeah.
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 Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
And the final item I've got is Myers-Briggs, which is interesting. So, for
Mhm.
those who don't know, the Myers-Briggs test is a personality test. I actually think, from memory, it's been around for a few decades. Now, I'm actually planning to talk about this more down the road. So, this is almost a bit of a teaser. I'm just mentioning that it's something that I'm currently researching. Known about Myers-Briggs for a long time. Interestingly enough, some people have claimed that it's complete nonsense and hogwash and so forth. It actually has a really high, really effective predictive power at predicting people's future employment choices and careers and so forth. So there's a very high correlation between the category someone gets in a Myers-Briggs test and the type of work they choose to do. So that
Mhm.
bit I've known for quite a long time. But recently I've been looking a little bit more into it and I found all sorts of interesting things. What I didn't realize, and I probably should have, this probably should have been obvious, but there are six, for those who don't know, there are 16 categories. So, and there are now some subcategories that have been put in and so forth, but broadly there are 16 categories. And they argue that humans essentially have a personality that fits into one of these categories. And they ask you a series of questions and they determine which category you fit into. I could probably kind of naively assume that the categories were fairly evenly distributed across the population. That's actually not true. They're
Mhm.
actually highly variable. And of course, the Pareto principle would suggest that the 80-20 rule, it's very unusual for things to be evenly distributed across the population, actually. So if I thought about it, I probably would have realized that would be the case. Anyway, I now know that they are not evenly distributed. But what's really interesting is that there are very marked gender differences between the categories.
Mhm.
So the distribution of categories for men and the distribution of categories for women are very different. Again, this is something I'll be talking about more later on. I've talked about the male variability quite a lot in the past, how men tend to vary more than women. Interestingly enough, when you look at the distribution across the Myers-Briggs categories, sure enough, men vary more across the categories than women do. And in actual fact, roughly half of all women fall into 4 of the 16 categories. So what's also interesting, and it's really got me thinking actually, is that when you start to look at these categories, if you look at, say, if you talk about some of the categories that people would describe as, say, being stereotypically female behaviors or being more emotional, for example, as an example, something like that, those tend to be characteristics associated with the categories in which women are more likely to be in. So I find this really interesting because this would allow for some sort of quantitative analysis of this to say, okay, yes, here we have women falling into these categories and they're more likely to exhibit these behaviors. But then you do have other women who behave completely differently and are more analytical and so forth. And you do see a smaller proportion of people in those other categories. So I just found it really interesting that some of the, and it's the same thing with the male ones as well, some of the stereotypically male behaviors are actually things that seem to line up quite well with certain Myers-Briggs categories for which men are more likely to, a greater proportion of men fall into those categories. So I find it quite interesting. Anyway, so I'm investigating that more. We're going to be putting some stuff on Wiki for Men and putting up data on the actual percentages and so forth that have been found. But it is quite interesting. So if you look at something like INTP, which is what I am, which is quite an analytic category, you end up finding about 3/4 of the people in it are male, and it's quite interesting stuff. So I'll be looking into that. That's really just a bit of a teaser, I suppose. But I haven't got my ducks in a row yet. But I do find it interesting that, and I was deciding whether I was even going to say that today or wait till later. I do find it interesting that some of the things that one might say are things normally associated with women versus associated with men. They do seem to me to line up quite well with some of the categories for that men and women are more likely to fall into. Which would also explain, for example, there'll be some men who will be perhaps more emotional and so forth, but it won't be something that will occur quite as often.
Absolutely. I consistently test as INTJ. So,
okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I'm definitely more. Yeah. I judge with an iron fist for the most part. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I said I'm a. Yeah. Go on.
No. I mean, I don't know if you perceive that, but I tend to cast judgment all the time, like I did like a billion times today. Yes.
So I'm learning more about the only category I've probably read about in the past is really my own, but I am spending some time reading about the others too. But I want to clarify something though. Of course, you answer a bunch of questions and not everybody's in the same place. I'm INTP, but I'm very close to E. So I come right up close to the line on the E category. And that sometimes leads people to, I've heard a few people I know say they thought I was an extrovert. I'm not. I'm very much the introvert. But I always say I'm an introvert that does a good impression of an extrovert. And consistently, whenever I've done a Myers-Briggs test, and I've done them a number of times, sounds like you have too, I come very close to the boundary, the middle point for IND.
Right.
So I'm obviously, close.
One thing I would probably make an edit to the whole Myers-Briggs thing is like the intrinsic definition of introvert and extrovert. Like I might have mentioned this before in our podcast. But I think that the true difference between an introvert and extrovert is that an introvert talks to people, an extrovert just talks to the crowd, not to anyone.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
That's interesting. The definition I've heard, which I thought made sense to me, was if you go and socialize, because the point is that introverts also like to socialize, but perhaps less. But one of the arguments is that an introvert will go away from socializing, even though they enjoyed it, they're tired. An extrovert will go away from socializing energized, and I most definitely go away from it tired.
Right, yeah, but I like talking one-to-one with people. I like talking directly to a certain person, and when I try that with an extrovert, sometimes they look, for lack of a better term, in distress. They seem to not be able to really handle one-on-one.
Where's my audience?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So yeah, they're not really capable of that. But yeah, so that's like the only kind of clarification I would add to Myers-Briggs. But the thing about Myers-Briggs is that people like Jordan Peterson kind of kind of tout that Big Five is the better version. You should use Big Five instead. But Big Five is not really all that helpful. It's too spread out, and it doesn't really tell anything about about anyone quite as clearly, and it's much more boring. Myers-Briggs, at the very least, is much more fun.
Yeah. I
Nobody's
found
go ahead, go
no,
ahead.
go on. No,
No,
you
no,
go ahead. Let's go. Yeah.
yeah, sure. Like, because like something with Myers-Briggs, at least you can have a little bit of fun with it. Like you can like take 16 characters of MASH and see where they fit in, or 16 characters
Yeah.
of Star Trek, or something like that. And so it's more fun to guess or kind of make a determination about what personality, real or fiction, is a certain thing. But I don't really see that much when it comes to Big Five. So.
No, I think that's a good point actually, because you're right. The Big Five is not very exciting, is it? I think it's probably quite effective in its own way. But where I found it to be more useful is in talking about populations. For example, women are higher in neuroticism than men, for example, and that you can see that as a trend. Talking about an entire gender in one characteristic there, I found to be more useful. But in terms of talking about as an individual, yes, I think Myers-Briggs is much more interesting. And as you say, it's fun too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to be sure, right. Yeah, but one thing I've seen is like a bit of a clash as to what everything is. Like, Google right now is telling me that INTP is a logician, but I'm pretty sure it kind of varies. Like sometimes I hear something other than logician,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
let's see, INTJ. Some people say INTJ is an architect, but I've heard other things. Like I think even strategist came up once, but I'm pretty sure I saw a strategist in a different personality type. There's a
Yeah.
bit of a subjectivity to it.
For sure. And given that it's 16 characteristics, there are still going to be variations in the individual personalities and so forth, and things that just because two people in the same category doesn't mean they're necessarily going to agree on everything or like the same things or anything like that. So yes, but I do think it does seem to have some predictive power in terms of profession and some other areas as well. So I think I certainly think it has value, and I think you make a really good point. It's also fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it over horoscopes any day.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
right. That's quite right.
Mm.
So that's all I had. I said I'll be actually doing on Wiki for Men. I'll have tables and so forth, percentages and all sorts of interesting stuff to look at. But
Right.
that's all I have. But I've only obviously got Zoe McLellan to talk about. If you don't have anything else you wanted to chat about.
Well, actually, since we're on the subject of Zoe, like a couple weeks back, I forgot, I neglected to mention this in the previous podcast, but I was doing my Voyager run through at the time, and I came across the two episodes that she was in.
That you did,
Oh,
yes.
so she was a Bajoran character, right? And we in the Trek world know about the Bajorans. Turns out that her character was a diversity hire.
Oh, right, you're right.
Yeah.
I never
So
made that connection. You're right.
it was pretty funny because the Bajorans were kind of recovering from the Cardassian occupation,
Right.
and she and the character explained that they needed more Bajorans in Starfleet to kind of for PR, I guess. So that's why she wasn't any good. But yeah,
That's great. I'm gonna have to put that on the Wiki for Men article. Yeah, that's
sure.
fabulous.
Mhm.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
Mhm.
The character something Tellus. No, I can't
Cell Tellus or something like that.
remember.
No,
Yeah.
Talcellus. I got it backwards.
Tellus.
Talcellus. That's the one. Yeah.
Tellus. Right.
Mhm.
It was a
Yeah.
diversity hire. I love it.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to
Right.
do my usual spiel
Do
on
it.
Zoe McLellan.
All right.
As of August 2024, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McLellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McLellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing there. McLellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington state, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McLellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McLellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you. Well, I guess we'll talk in 2 weeks.
Yep. Talk to you then. See you.
Talk to you then. Bye bye.